Mr. Nils Annenen, German Deputy Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, will be giving an interview to the public TV tonight. Mr. Annenen, thank you so much for this opportunity.
My pleasure. How are you?
Fine, thank you. You?
I'm happy to be back in Armenia. It's a great pleasure, and thanks for having me.
What brings you to Armenia, Mr. Annenen?
Well, we are here to resume our bilateral government-to-government negotiations about the German-Armenian Economic Cooperation Agreement. It's the first official negotiation since 2014, and I think it's a very important occasion. We have been negotiating very successfully so far with representatives of the Armenian government, and I hope that we are not only going to come to a good conclusion, but that we are sending also a clear message that the German-Armenian cooperation is well on track, that in difficult times, our two countries can rely on each other. And we also want to make a small contribution in times where attention is very much focused on what is happening right now in Ukraine, what is happening in the Gaza Strip, that we are looking at those crises, but we are also looking at the Caucasus.
Mr. Annenen, economic cooperation is very important, but of course you know that Armenia, the Armenian expert field, are very concerned about security issues. Recently, Baku refuses to negotiate on the Western platform. They turned down Grenada, they turned down Brussels, they turned down Washington. What will the EU's and Germany's, as a strong player, response be to bring Baku back to the negotiation table?
Our approach as Development Cooperation Ministry, first and foremost, is to support Armenia economically, to support the sovereignty of Armenia, for example, in investing in renewable energy and making Armenia less dependent from external energy sources. But as a German government and as a member of the European Union, our position has always been very clear. We expect from all our partners, including from Baku, a peaceful settlement, and we hope that we can contribute to an environment where a negotiated settlement and hopefully one day a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan will be possible. That's our position. And in order to achieve that, the parties need to talk. And I think one aspect is absolutely clear. The European member countries, the member countries of the European Union, are committed to that goal. We are preparing and we are ready to continue the political process. And we haven't given up hope on that. So sometimes the challenges are huge, it's difficult, but we hope that also Azerbaijan will resume the negotiated path, and that's what we are working for.
And if they do not, by the way, Aliyev said no international pressure will have an effect on Azerbaijan. How would you comment on that? Because this sounds like a refusal to negotiate over the peace treaty.
Yeah, well, of course, I mean, we are listening to every statement, and I have to say my ministry is not the leading ministry on the political negotiations, as we are primarily concerned with economic cooperation. But we also hear statements coming from Baku with a positive connotation towards the peace agreement. We have been hearing that also in the past. So it depends always a little bit on the timing, which statement you're receiving. What counts in the end, at the end of the day, is a peaceful settlement. And I can only repeat that's the German position, that's the European path, and it's a path that we are also offering to Azerbaijan, as we believe that also the economic cooperation, the prospects for prosperity for all the countries in the Caucasus are well suited if we come to a peaceful arrangement and to come to mutually beneficial agreements. And that's what we are working for, but it's complicated, it's difficult, and sometimes it takes a certain amount of, how should I say, also patience and dedication to move that dossier, that difficult dossier, forward.
It isn't only Baku that is not very happy about EU and Armenia relations going deeper. Russia clearly perceives EU consolidation around Armenia as a threat. The Russian Foreign Office has said more than once that the West wants to drive Russia out of the region. What would your comment be on this?
We have been, as friends of Armenia, following and supporting the decision, a decision by the Armenian people and its representation in the government, for a path of reform, for even in extremely difficult days, the way of strengthening Armenian democracy. That's not a decision that anybody is taking in Brussels or in Berlin. And I sometimes think that the Russian government is not understanding that the decision for democracy was made by the Armenian people. And of course, we believe in democracy, we believe in a rules-based international order. We believe it's going to be beneficial for everybody, at the end of the day, even for Russia. And that's why we also in the ministry that I'm representing here are trying to do everything with the ongoing negotiation to strengthen the position of Armenia in a difficult geopolitical environment. And that's why we're working on questions like economic opportunities. We want to attract more private investment from Germany to Armenia. And I think, as I mentioned before, we are working, among other fields, on the question of energy, because that will give the democratically elected Armenian government more space of maneuver. So nothing that we are doing is directed against any country. But everything that we are doing has one clear goal, and that is the well-being of the Armenian economy and strengthening democracy in a region where, that was certainly not the usual way of running a country, and that seems to be still irritating the big neighbor Armenia has to deal with.
Two concepts of opening connectivity links in the region are on the table now. One is the so-called crossroad of peace that supposes Armenian control over the infrastructure that passes through Armenian territory. And the other is the so-called Zangezur corridor that supposes Russian control. Which concept does Germany favor, both politically and economically speaking?
Well, the German government very much welcomed the initiative of Prime Minister Pashinyan, and I think the idea of converting somehow Armenia into, as you mentioned, and you use the expression crossroad, that's a concept that is very appealing. It will benefit Armenia in terms of economic and political stability, but it will also beneficial for Armenia's neighboring countries. And I somehow think that's the beauty of that concept. But of course, it requires political leadership and it requires a peaceful settlement of the ongoing conflicts. And that's why the German government has always taken the position and is using its good offices to bring forward the argument that, for example, opening up economic relationships and maybe at the end of the day also finally opening the border between Armenia and Turkey will be beneficial for both sides. We have been working with many countries in an increasing amount of investments in infrastructure projects. The German government is doing that with certain instruments that we have, but first and foremost, it's a project of the European Union. We are increasing the investments in a project that you probably know, the Global Gateway projects. And Armenia is positioned in a way that it could benefit from that investment. That's certainly what we are aiming for. But as I said, the political realities are still facing some challenges. And that makes it all the more important that the different governments are engaging in negotiations and talks among each other. And the European Union is in a position to facilitate those talks. But we know that that has been viewed with certain, should I say, suspicion and resentment by the Russian government, and that is something I believe needs to be overcome.
So are you saying that the government of Germany supports the project of the Crossroad of Peace?
Well, I am saying that we have been supportive of Armenia's way since it chose the path of democracy, and that includes the economic project that the government of Armenia has been put forward. And I certainly think that the Crossroad concept is very appealing and attractive. And it offers a lot of opportunities for Armenia, but also for Armenia's neighboring countries. And that's why we hope that Prime Minister Pashinyan's initiative will resume and will be successful. But the implementation is not the responsibility of any foreign government. It will need to be handled by Armenia itself. But Armenia in that situation can rely on its friends and partners in the European Union.
Mr. Annan, we are witnessing a recent deepening of political ties, as we already mentioned, between the EU, Germany inclusive, and Armenia. What economic perspectives spring forth because of this enhancement of ties?
Well, first of all, I agree. I think it's very positive. We see a huge number of high-level visits from Germany to Armenia, and also vice versa. We also had constant, very high-level interaction over the last month, and that shows you that Germany cares about what is happening in your region, that we care about Armenian democracy, and I think that in itself is a positive political development. Having said that, we are talking with the German business associations at home. We know that there are many companies who have an interest to be more present here in Armenia and in the region. They, of course, also look at whether or not the idea of stronger interconnectivity can be implemented, because that would offer an even more attractive view on the region. So, like Armenia, we are a democracy. So, as the vice minister, I cannot order a German company to make a decision for an investment in Armenia. But I think we are on a good path. And if I may add, one of the projects that the German Development Corporation is implementing here with our partner organizations is to invest in Armenia's capacity, for example, to improve the professional education of young Armenians. So I think that vocational training program that we are implementing here, and we want to add to that, is offering opportunities for young people here in Armenia. It's an encouragement also to look to a professional education. University education is great, but it's maybe not for everybody, and it's certainly not more worthy than the professional education. That also is a philosophy that we try to spread a little bit. But a well-educated workforce makes it also more attractive for foreign investors, including German investors. So yes, I do think that the high-level engagement is going to be beneficial for Armenia.
As Deputy Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, how do you evaluate the investment climate in Armenia?
Well, I think Armenia over the last years made impressive progress. And you know, I'm not the person to judge about what is happening in Armenia, so I want to be careful. I think you know best about what goes well and what could be improved. We have, I think, overall a good investment climate, but some of the geopolitical tensions that we mentioned in our discussion are still a factor. So that means it's not only because of the question that you mentioned, security first and foremost, but it's also going to have an impact on the success story that we are all trying to write here in terms of attracting foreign investment. There are also some investors who are cautious if they see that there's still a military threat possibly on the table. Another argument from our point of view to resume political talks as soon as possible. But I think the reform agenda of the Armenian government is very positive. And that's one of the reasons that I came here to talk directly with my colleagues and to hopefully resume successful government negotiations.
Mr. Annan, monopolies are out of the way since 2018. The economic freedom is there. Strictly from the economic perspective, what can be done to make Armenia attractive to the German investor?
I think you're doing already a lot that makes Armenia attractive. So the legal framework, I think, improved significantly. I'm going to not only talk with your government, but also with the chair of Armenia's central bank. Sound public finances are important. As I mentioned, the question of vocational training will have an impact. If you want to invest here and you have a well-educated workforce, that's very beneficial. But certainly, I mean, the question of energy prices, I could imagine that that's a topic for ordinary citizens of Armenia here. It's also going to be a topic for investors. So investing in renewable energies in the middle and long-term perspective, reducing the tariffs and making Armenia more independent and prosperous, that's going to help for certain. And if I may say with some caution here, but we saw progress in fields of good governance, effective governance, putting more resources, for example, also to the municipalities, which I think is very important to enable them to deliver services. And we also saw improvement in the work against corruption. I know that here's a lot of pressure right now on all the political actors and parliament and government. But we hope that those efforts will continue in order to maintain the progress that we saw over the last years. And we know from experience, which has nothing to do with Armenia, that if you lower the pressure, if you need to divert your attention to other policy fields, then sometimes the old habits kick in again. And I think we should together make an effort to prevent that from happening.
Thank you for sitting down with the Public TV.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Nils Annan, Deputy Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, gave an interview to the Public TV tonight.